Good afternoon, and thank you all for standing by. For the duration of today's conference, all participants' lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session. At that time, if you would like to ask a question, press star 1. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Deborah Rivera. Thank you, ma'am. You may begin.
Thank you so much, Holly. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Census Academy webinar series. My name is Deborah Rivera, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I will also be providing technical support for our presenter here in the room. So just in case some of you were not aware, today is the day that we are launching the new Census Academy site. We have courses, a new data gem, and of course our webinar series, which will continue through the end of June. If you have not had a chance yet to check out the new Census Academy site, please do so after we finish our webinar for today. And speaking of, we have an amazing session for you where we will learn about using the Response Outreach Area Mapper to locate and learn about hard-to-count areas. A few housekeeping items before we get started. As the operator stated, we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting this recording and any materials associated to it to our Census Academy site as free learning resources. So it'll probably take about 1 week before you see them up there, but please keep checking for those. We will hold off for questions until the end of the presentation, and when that time comes, we ask that you please refrain to asking one question and one follow-up. At that point, if you still have any questions remaining, you are welcome to queue back up to ask your other questions. So with those items out of the way, I am so excited to introduce our speaker for today, the wonderful Suzanne McArdle, who is a computer mapping specialist in the Geography Division. Suzanne began her career at the Census Bureau in 2008 as a cartographer, and for the past 3 years she has served as a team leader in the Cartographic Products and Services branch. Suzanne leads the generalization team that produces cartographic boundary files to support mapping and data dissemination. And she also leads the team that maintains the Census Automated Map Production System, which is a batch mapping system that produces large and small format maps to support various Census Bureau programs. With that, thank you, Suzanne.
Good morning, good afternoon, hello, and thank you, Deb. My name is Suzanne McArdle, and as of today, I've spent my entire 10-year and 11-month career within the United States Census Bureau's Geography Division. If you're counting that in decennial years, yes, that means I'm already on the brink of my second decennial census, and yes, that means I have a little bit of bragging rights around here. I'm really excited to be here to go over the Response Outreach Area Mapper. But before I jump into a scary and daring live demo of the application, I want to cover a number of background items that I hope will help lay out some of the basics for you to better understand Rome and its data. So I'd like to call out the goal of the 2020 census first, followed by the purpose of Rome, an introduction to this decade's hard-to-count score, a metric called the low response score, and then I'll go over the database that the low response score lives in, which is also the data source for the Response Outreach Area Mapper, the planning database, and then just since we're covering using the census tract level version of the planning database, I just wanted to cover a couple of important points related to census tracts for those of you who may not be as familiar with that type of census geography. And then we'll jump into that live demo of Rome. And I'll finish up by pointing you to a number of publicly available resources that you can refer back to with questions and that can help you make the most of Rome. So let's just pretend that you can hear all of us on the line reciting this together. The goal of the 2020 census is count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. To reiterate the scale and perspective of this endeavor, the Census Bureau estimates that by 2020, there will be more than 330 million people living in about 140 million housing units. No pressure. The non-response follow-up operation, that's when someone doesn't respond and we need to recontact them until we do get their response, is one of the most costly parts of conducting the decennial census. The Census Bureau is employing a number of strategies to help boost self-response rates, to avoid as much of the non-response follow-up activities as possible. So in looking over the registrants list for this event, I'm really excited to share Rome with the tribal, state, and local government officials that are listening in, to all the community groups, advocacy groups, and partners who work tirelessly across your communities to educate, encourage, and ensure a complete and accurate count. So the work that you all will be doing, whether across the entire country or focused in your local areas around the country, is tremendous, and it's a critical piece of making the 2020 census a success. So thank you for your time, energy, and commitment to the 2020 census, and for spending time listening to me today. We hope that you'll find Rome can help you create a well-informed outreach strategy and help you make a plan for using limited resources that you may have, and that it adds to you making a difference where you live, work, and care. So a little bit about the purpose of Rome. Rome is a web mapping application that was specifically developed to make hard-to-count areas easier to identify and to provide a socioeconomic and demographic characteristic profile of these areas. Determining where these hard-to-count areas are and understanding that area's characteristics allows the Census Bureau to tailor communications and partnership campaigns, and it helps management plan for field resources. For example, how many staff to hire and what language skills should those staff have. Ultimately, informed decision-making efforts can help improve self-response rates. So what do we mean by hard to survey or hard to count populations? Well, we have a metric that's called the low response score. We also refer to this as the LRS. The LRS is a model-driven metric that was calculated in-house. It's calculated at both the census tract and block group level, and it represents the predicted male non-response rate. So I know I'm moving a little bit quickly through here, but once we open the Rome application and you can sort of see this visually, I think it'll be a lot more clear at that point. So what do we mean by represents the predicted male non-response rate? Basically, the low response score is to be interpreted as the percentage of households predicted to not self-respond to the decennial census. So that means that a high low response score indicates a predicted low self-response rate or a harder to survey area. Again, this will become way more clear once we look at the map itself. And lastly, the LRS is stored in something called the planning database. And that database is the main source for the Rome application. So the planning database is a product that's created and published by the Census Bureau on a semi-annual basis. The most recent version of the database that was published is the 2018 planning database, and that was released in June of last year. That means that we're actively working on the 2019 planning database right now, and that should be live at the end of next month, along with an update to this Rome application. The planning database contains the low response score. It also contains a subset or a greatest hits of the American Community Survey, or ACS, 5-year estimates, as well as some 2010 census operational data. So again, that low response score allows us to figure out what areas are hard to survey, and then the ACS estimates and that 2010 census data allows us to view the socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of an area to determine why it might be a little bit hard to count. The planning database comes in 2 main formats. There is a nearly 40 million cell comma delimited file that you can download and use in a third-party application like Excel or SAS. And then there is it also comes in within the Census API. So if you're a web developer who's familiar with APIs, you can pull out information from the planning database right from the Census API. So until Rome, there was no geospatial component of the planning database. Users, including Census Bureau employees and members of the public, had to either work without maps, they had to create them for themselves, or they had to have somebody create maps for them. We've been able to open the power and capability of the planning database through a simple web browser that doesn't require any data download or special data handling of any kind or special software on your end. It's ready to use right away. So before I jump into that, I'm not going to go through every aspect of what a census tract is, and I know these slides as well as a recording of this webinar are going to be available, so you'll have this at handy here. But a census tract is a small, relatively permanent statistical subdivision of a county or county equivalent. Generally, they have between 1,200 and 8,000 people. The optimum size is considered about 4,000 people, and some census tracts even have zero population. These generally follow visible and identifiable features on the ground, but sometimes they follow non-visible legal boundaries. Also, their boundaries are delineated with the intention of being maintained over a long time for statistical comparison between censuses. So occasionally, these are split due to population growth, or they're merged as a result of substantial population decline in an area. And they are updated by local participants, possibly by even some folks that are listening in right now, prior to each decennial census as a part of the Participant Statistical Areas Program. So specifically for the purposes of Rome, this will become a little bit more clear once we get into the application and look through the data table. But they are uniquely defined by their state FIPS code, their county FIPS code, and a tract code. That's something called GeoID in the application, and I'll make sure that that's very clear where that is once we get into there. And I think it's really important just to go over what a census tract is, since a census tract, national map of census tracts is Rome's foundation. So we'll get into that in a moment. Really quickly, looking at census tracts through time, this is a quick illustration of what happens in an area that experiences population growth over time. So you can see this same blue area highlighted across the decades, and you'll notice that mostly the outer shape of this stays the same, but this full area is further subdivided into more census tracts. So let's look at the location of the population growth from 1990 to 2010. If we look at this will help just demonstrate that census tracts are split in a meaningful way rather than an arbitrary one. So this census tract in 1990 was 1130.03. You'll see that this same area from 1990 to 2000, there are more dots on this map. Each dot on this map represents 10 people. So you'll see that the area of the census tract in 1990 and 2000 was actually split into 3 different pieces. The census tract, the northern part of the census tract was split into 2 census tracts, and the smaller one, and the southern part was split into a separate one. You'll see that there are more dots within the northern part, and that's why that was split into 2 pieces, and this larger census tract with a more sparse population was not further subdivided than there. So now I want to jump into the actual Rome application. I just want to again stress that there is no download of data required for this at all. It's accessible through a simple web browser. So all that's needed is a web browser of some kind, whichever is your favorite, and internet connectivity. So it's hosted by the Census Bureau, and it provides a map and data table interface for users to identify and learn about hard-to-count census tracts. So without further ado, let's jump into the application itself. So upon entering into Rome, and I'm going to make sure that everybody knows where the landing page is to access Rome and all of its resources before I wrap up the presentation. But I don't want everybody playing around with the application while I'm going through it, so I'm going to wait to share that information in case you already have it. So we're jumping into the application, and you can see that you get a little splash screen here, and it says click on a census tract to identify its low response score and to learn more information about its people and households. So we'll go ahead and click OK, and you'll see that the foundation of Rome is a national map of census tracts. They're shaded by their low response score. So back when I was discussing what a low response score is, and it was maybe a little bit tricky to see without a visual, but basically the low response score is the predicted male non-response rate. So as we see on this map and in this legend, the darker the census tract, the higher the LRS. That means it's harder to count. So the darker areas are harder to count on the map. So just right off the base, to cover some of the simple measures here, we can navigate around this map similar to how you would navigate other familiar web mapping applications. So we can use a number of these zoom buttons in the upper left. Zoom in a little bit, and remember we're just sort of exploring right now. If we click and drag our mouse, we can pan across the country. We can use the home button to get back to the lower 48 or the contiguous U.S. And there are even several different preset bookmarks available for Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. Let's take a little jaunt up to Alaska. And you'll notice that a lot of Alaska is gray, which means that there is no low response score calculated for these census tracts. And there are several reasons that a census tract does not have a low response score. If you'd like to reference back the reasons, they're right on the About tab within the application, right here within another quick explanation of the low response score and how to interpret it, as well as the reasons for when a census tract does not have a low response score. So basically, this happens when a census tract either contains 0 housing units or it falls below a minimum threshold for qualifying addresses in the 2010 census mailback areas, which is why most of the state of Alaska is gray and does not have a low response score calculated. Or a low response score is not calculated if its ACS data was suppressed to avoid data disclosure. And another reason is that if it experienced a geographic boundary change between 2010 and the 2016 geography for which the 2012 to 2016 ACS 5-year estimates are based, which makes it non-comparable. So I do want to point out that even when a census tract does not have a low response score, you can click onto the map and still learn all of its ACS estimates here. So hopefully there's still a little bit of helpful information for those listening where a low response score, where a census tract does not have a low response score. So one of the other things that I wanted to get off the table really quickly is if we go over to Puerto Rico, you'll notice that again, there are no low response scores calculated for Puerto Rico. And that's because the predicted model of mail return behavior that was used for the contiguous United States, Alaska, and Hawaii was not highly predictive of mail return behavior when it was applied to Puerto Rico. So it was inappropriate to publish this data because it wasn't very accurate. But again, we have all of the ACS estimates available across Puerto Rico. So all of those ways of navigating the map are incredibly helpful if we're just sort of simply exploring. But something tells me that everyone on the phone has their own interests, whether it's a particular type of geography or a particular facet of the population. So I wanted to go through how to search for a particular area of interest. So if you go in this upper left here of the application, there's a drop-down box, search box, if you will. So you can search by a number of different types of geography. You can search for a particular address. You can search by a state. So this is for navigational purposes. So whatever we search by in this drop-down window, it will take us directly to that area on the map. And I'm going to demonstrate that once we get to the bottom. So you can search by a county, by a particular census tract. Let's just click on this as an example. So if you do click on a census tract, it gives you an example of how to search for that particular census tract. So to search for this, for a census tract from this drop-down, you would need that full GeoID of a census tract. And I'll show you how to find that a little bit later. You can search by something called a regional census center, by an area census office, by a particular tribal area, by Alaska Native Regional Corporation, by the 3 different types of school districts. Right now, you can search by 115th congressional district, but as many of us know, the 116th Congress is actually what's operating right now. So when this application is updated next month, this will be updated to 116th congressional district. We have state legislative districts in here, and something called a ZICTA, which is a zip code tabulation area, and that's the best spatial representation of a zip code that exists. And then by a place. So before I search by a place, I wanted to come across to our layers pane. So that's on the upper right side. and looks like a set of layers of pieces of paper. And we have every type of geography that's available in this drop-down menu. We have that available to visualize on our map. So that'll be a little bit more important once I get to this next spot. So I'd like to go ahead and search for a particular place. I want to take us to Langley Park, Maryland. So you'll see the IntelliSense prompt. I can be lazy. I don't even need to type the full extent of where I'm going. But when I go to Langley Park, Maryland, a number of you on the phone may not be familiar with Langley Park, Maryland. So I want to kind of show you a number of the ways that we can get familiar with where we are and what type of area Langley Park, Maryland is. So when we navigate using this search box, the area highlights in orange within the map window. So I'm going to X out of the search box here, and that place boundary of Langley Park, Maryland does disappear. But if I'd like to get that back on, I can go to the layers list and turn that on from within the layer list pane. And when I re-click on that area, it redelineates or re-highlights the full extent, the full geospatial extent of Langley Park, Maryland. So you can see that Langley Park, Maryland is made up of just a few number of tracts, and they all happen to fall within the highest category of low response. So for people who are not familiar with Langley Park, Maryland, just want to do a couple of things here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that place layer. And then I'm going to demonstrate that you can actually turn off the low response score layer entirely to reveal the street network of the underlying base map. One of the other things that we can do is turn on satellite imagery to get a sense of we aren't in rural America in Langley Park, Maryland. This actually looks pretty high density, little suburby over here with little neighborhoods of homes, and a little bit industrial. And if I turn on that low response score data back, we can get a sense of where those hard to count areas are, and it may be what types of neighborhoods or industrial areas these places are in. So if I click on, one other thing real quick, I can also change the transparency of this layer if I do like the look of the satellite imagery, or if the satellite imagery is really important for whatever analysis I'm doing. We can continue to keep on the low response score, but modify that as needed. I'm going to go ahead and just leave the low response score on. And I'd like to go ahead and click on the census tract here. And so I want to get you a little bit more familiar with the pop-up itself. So if we're looking at this particular pop-up, we can see the census tract code here is 8056.02. You can see that it is in Prince George's County, Maryland, and you can see the specific low response score for the census tract. So remember, we're supposed to be interpreting the low response score as the percentage of households predicted to not self-respond to the decennial census. So here we think that 39% of households will not self-respond to the decennial census. So let's take a little bit of a look in the pop-up and figure out what may be going on in this particular area. So you'll notice that we have the 2012 to 2016 ACS 5-year estimates in here, and that's because those are the estimates and the low response score from the 2018 planning database. Again, next month when this application is refreshed, we will have the most current 2013 to 2017 ACS 5-year estimates available, and a new low response score that will be modeled off of those new estimates. So once we look a little bit further in this pop-up here, we'll see that the household median income is $71,000. So that's not particularly low. We have 70% of the population here has not graduated from high school. We have 58% of the population where no one in the household age 14 or above speaks English very well. We have a high number of renter-occupied housing. That's also sort of a signature for possibly hard to count areas. We have 33% of the housing units that have related children under 6, and 53% of the housing units here are multi-unit housing. So this may help us learn a little bit more about how to approach this area. For one, there's a possible language barrier, and I can show you a little bit more about how to explore more obvious barriers to self-response, like non-English speaking households. So let's go ahead, and at this point in time, I'd like to open up the data table to show you how we may be able to do that without simply clicking around on the map and taking guesses at where people may be. So if we open the data table, I'm just going to the very bottom center of the screen, and there's a little tab here. If we click onto that, the data table pops up from the bottom of the screen. And so at this point in time, I want to point out that the default view of this data table is to simply show all of the census tracts that are in this map window down in the data table itself. So what do I mean by that? If we go all the way to the bottom left of the data table, you'll see that we have 15 features in this data table. That means that we have a record for 15 different census tracts in here. If I uncheck the button for filter by map extent, we have access to the 74,000 census tracts nationwide. So I want to go ahead and issue a query or a filter on this full national data set to try to help us answer a question. So I go to the options on the data table, and I choose filter, and I can add an expression set in here. And I hope that right now everyone's sort of thinking about what ways filtering a full data table could impact or help their work. Before I execute this query, I did just want to mention that all of those variables that we saw in the pop-up are available across here in the data table. So all of this data is accessible from within the data table. And there are a number of resources that fully define exactly what all of these variables are. And I'll go ahead and show those to you in a moment here. So let's go ahead and execute a filter while all of your wheels are turning about what types of things you might want to look for out of this data set. And I want to go ahead and I want to find all of the census tracts in Prince George's County, Maryland, where more than a quarter of the residents primarily speak Spanish. So let's go ahead down to our state county name variable. Again, we do have a data dictionary that can help you sift through all of these named variables, and that's accessible right from the main landing page on census.gov. So I'll go ahead and make sure that you have that information before we sign off here. So I'll go ahead and do the state county name equals Prince George's County, Maryland. And I'll go down to our Spanish-speaking variable. So where the percentage of population age 5 and above who don't speak English very well but do speak Spanish at home. So we're going to say is greater than 25, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And in the bottom left of this data table, you'll see that now I have 14 features within this data table. If I shift-click all of these census tracts right here, we can zoom out on the map and see that we've identified basically an entire neighborhood and sort of suburb of Washington, D.C. that has a lot of Spanish-speaking households. So the first thing on someone's to-do list that's working in this area would be to help identify Spanish-speaking groups to spread the word of the census there. And Census would be using this data to hire enumerators and other folks that would be working in the field, something that we call partnership specialists with those language skills as well. But I want to look at this from a little bit of a different area, or excuse me, a different angle. So you may not typically think of wealthy areas as having low self-response. So let's look at census tracts in DC. So I'm going to go ahead and clear our selection on the map. and we're going to execute another filter. So we can just X out of the one that we've already generated and start fresh. We'll do District of Columbia here and find our median household income variable, where median household income is higher than $90,000. So let's go ahead and execute that query. You'll see that it's thinking, and at the bottom, we'll see that 64 census tracts. Features and census tracts are the same thing for the purposes of this data table, meet that requirement. So we go over to our low response score column on that data table. You can actually click on that column header and sort descending so that the hardest to count, so the highest low response score census tract rises to the top of the table. If we double click on that area, we can zoom to it and we can get a little bit of a better sense of where this is in the district, and also look at a little bit more about the demographics. So we're going back to the pop-up here. So 31% of the households in this census tract are predicted to not self-respond to the decennial census. And so we can see that there are almost 29% of the population are between the ages of 18 and 24. We can see, if you go to the bottom down towards the housing metrics, that 87% of these units are renter occupied. And here we go, almost 40% of the residents did not live here last year. So an effective strategy to boost self-response in areas that have high renter occupancy and recent residency is to encourage the internet mode of self-response. So again, this is more information for how we can apply a strategy on the ground in this area. But no matter why an area is hard to count, our outreach can consist of installing voices directly in these places, and the Census Bureau recruits other trusted messengers within these areas to help educate and motivate people to respond. But one thing I do want to point out is that the Census Bureau doesn't collect and maintain all local data that could help us identify a specific establishment to visit within this hard-to-count community. And that's where the ability to add open data from other sources makes this tool even more useful. So if we go over to our Add Data widget, I know that the GIS folks over in DC are awesome and have a ton of free open data. So I'd like to go ahead and search for the DC GIS cultural layer. I'd like to go ahead and add that to my map. So if I go back over to my layers pane now, I can see that I have a number of different things to choose from to add to my map. Let's say that I'd like to add libraries and places of worship. And if I come back over to my legend, I can see that those things are now added to my map. So within that the hardest to count census tract within Washington, D.C., I can see that there are 2 places of worship here. And it's likely that I would want to reach out to those religious leaders to see if they're willing to lend their voice to motivating the community. We could also select this nearby library as the site of an educational workshop. And if we host this educational workshop during the period of self-response in 2020, attendees would even be able to fill out their census form online right on site. But one of the things that I want to do right now is sort of introduce you to some of the resources. I have one more thing to show you with this open data tool and this open data feature. But I'd like to step outside of the application for a moment and direct us to census.gov/Rome. So this is the main landing page for the application and the main landing page for a lot of the resources that Rome has to offer. So you can see that the application itself and a live link to it are right down here. But up at the top of this page, we have a user guide, that data dictionary that I mentioned, some frequently asked questions, a quick tips guide, and a fact sheet. So I wanted to step over to the Roam user guide that's available to all of you, and to look in here for how to do our next piece that I'd like to show you. So if we click on our add data, one of the things that I just showed you is adding data from an already existing data source. So anything that somebody else has already shared or posted to Esri's online catalog, you'll be able to find from just using that simple add data button. But the Census Bureau actually posts a number of different types of mapping layers. So I wanted to show you, and again, there's language in this user guide right here for how to get back to what I'm going to do. But I'd like to go ahead and point us to the Tiger Web REST services. So I'm going to go ahead and open that in a separate tab. And this is a set of services that the Census Bureau hosts and allows people to use in their own GIS applications. Again, Roam has made it so that you don't need to use GIS specifically or have any sort of GIS skills or GIS software to be able to find hard-to-count communities. But if you are one of those savvy GIS individuals that may be calling in, then I wanted to point out that you could also add different layers to the map, even directly from services that the Census Bureau hosts. So all I'm doing is copying and pasting the link that was generated when I clicked right from the Tiger Web REST service. And I'm going to go ahead back into the application, and if we choose this URL option on that Add Data tab, we can paste that right in and add data to our map. So now you'll see that I'm looking at all of the Tiger Line street data. Again, we have that as an option that we can turn on and off in our data layers list, and we can also see what the different symbology means. So you'll see that some of these primary roads are red, some of the other secondary roads are orange based on this layer, and the local roads are labeled and appear in thin gray lines. So this could be just an extra additional helpful layer that might help you with your analysis. One of the things that if we took a quick look at the user guide, and you'll have this available to you after the fact. One of the other things on that page is a data dictionary. So anything from the data table is actually clearly defined in this data dictionary. So we have that GeoID, which is that census tract identifying code that I mentioned earlier. We have a full listing of all of the variables from the planning database that are available within Roam. So if you're interested on is a part of the data set that you're interested in available within Roam, this would be the place to check. And here is our frequently asked questions document. We have that there for you as well. And we also have this really awesome quick tips guide that's just a front and back one-pager that has a whole bunch of cheat sheets and how to do a lot of the things that I've talked about today. And if you're interested in sharing information about Roam with other people in your local area, or really pushing how important Roam is, or why somebody might need to figure out where hard-to-count areas are, there's a little flyer available here as well that has sort of the Cliff Notes about the Response Outreach Area Mapper. So two more quick things that I wanted to show you in the application, and then I'd be happy to demo any piece of this or answer any questions. So we're almost getting to that point of the presentation. But if we think back to the filter that we executed to find the 64 census tracts that had a median household income of larger than $90,000, right? So that's the filter that we have on our data table right now, and we have 64 features in that. Go ahead and clear the selected one. but I can export my subset of data to a comma delimited file to then either take it into Excel and have it as sort of an inventory list, or take it in a SPSS or R or some other sort of statistical program and run some other sort of analysis on it. And so you'll be able to export to CSV as long as the results of your data table are less than 5,000 features. And that's sort of a technical limitation on our side of things. But as long as your query generates less than 5,000 features, you'll be able to download that subset of the data table. So that could also be helpful for inventory or tracking a particular list of a particular part of the population. And one of the last functions that I wanted to show, get some of this stuff off of here, just clean it up a little bit, is this share option. So the button all the way in the upper right allows us to share the map in a number of different ways. So you'll also be able to embed this application if you are responsible for something called a complete count committee, or if you are part of an advocacy group or a community group that serves a particular area of the country, and you'd like to make Rome available right from your own web page, you're able to copy this HTML code right here and embed Rome right into your web page, just like we've done on our main census.gov/Rome. So even though I've been showing you Rome in a full screen separate window, the version of Rome that sits right within census.gov is easily used and accessible right from here. So why could this be neat? So let's go ahead back to the main separate window that I've been showing you. And if we go to link options, we can say that we'd like to send somebody to a particular feature on our map. So let's go ahead and just say that we would like to select the state of Maryland. So we want to copy and paste this link right here and send it to somebody else that we're interested in sharing a particular view of Rome. We can do that simply by copying and pasting that URL that's generated, so that when somebody else who opens the application, they'll be taken right to the state of Maryland. You can also do that with a number of the other geographies, any of the other geographies that are available from within Rome. So if you want to take somebody to a particular congressional district, for instance, you can do that too. Let's just go ahead and choose that. That's the first one available. Again, I'm just copying and pasting the link from the bottom of that window over to a different web page. So you can imagine I'm just sending this via email to somebody and having them focus on a particular area within the map. So there are a number of different unique types of ways that you can work to share this with people. If you wanted to embed that particular view of Rome right within your web page, you could simply use those link options like I just showed you, and then copy and paste this embed options so that you'd have an active working map of this particular congressional district right from your web page. So I think that I've sort of covered the main pieces of functionality within the application, and hopefully have generated some thought on everybody's ends of things. So I think that I would be, that Deb and I would be happy to try to answer any questions that folks may have at this point.
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question, please unmute your phone, press *1, and when prompted, record your first and last name clearly when prompted, so I may introduce you. To withdraw your question, press *2. Again, to ask a question, press *1. It may take a few moments for questions to come in. Please stand by.
So while we're waiting for people to queue up online, Deb's been keeping track of some of the questions that have come in through the chat, and so I'm just going to kind of go through just a couple of those. So we have a question on how do you find out what additional data is available to be overlaid? So there are two different types of data that's available to be, three different types of data that's available to be overlaid. So if you go we can find this a couple of ways. So within the Rome user guide that's available right from census.gov/Rome, we can look for our layer list. So right here in section 5.1, you can see all of the different types of geographies that are available within Rome right here. So those are also available right from the layer list, right in here. One of the other things, what I'm thinking this question was actually more so speaking to, is the add data function. So that add data widget button, essentially you can come in here and just look for anything, and different data sources will pop up right from within this browser. So there are countless numbers of data sets available here. You can add almost anything that you could think of that's already been published and is sitting out there in the open. So you can see Maryland even has their own set of libraries, and some of these data sets have even further information. So if you click on them, you can actually find the actual address. So you could spend hours and hours checking what kinds of data is available. In terms of what's available from the census, if we go back to that guide here, and using that add data section, we can go to the Tiger Web REST services, and these are authoritative census data layers that you'd be able to add from there. And so with that, if we have any other phone conversations or phone questions, we'd be happy to take those.
Yes, we have our first question is from Erling McNeil. Your line is open.
Hi. You showed a way to put up some options like places of worship. Can you show us again how you selected that, what steps you took?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I get very carried away with when playing around in the application itself is that add data widget button. So let me go ahead and I'm going to put our base map just back to gray so it's a little bit more simple on here. But I know for a fact, living near and working in the Washington, D.C. area, that D.C. has an incredibly amazing and rich open data set associated with it. So I just opened this Add Data button and searched here for D.C. GIS. And they actually have a cultural layer that has all of the different, all kinds of different types of information related to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just search specifically for that one. But I mean, you can get as creative as you want. I already have it added, actually. So I just typed DC GIS cultural on this, and I clicked the added link. And so over here now is where I have all of those data points within DC. We could go anywhere else in the country and type libraries or type places of worship, and if somebody has already published that type of information, that would also be available for us to add to it. Secondly, if you're aware or if your area has a local GIS or your state has a GIS program, you can Google that particular program and copy the URL of a service right into Rome using that other side of the add data function, that URL side. So there's a number of different ways to find different types of data sources.
And our next question comes from Lauren Hammond. Your line is open. Again, Lauren Hammond, your line is open. Perhaps check your mute button.
Yes, I thought my question was recorded. Will there be someone available by telephone this year and next year who we could call like a help desk?
For this particular application, I'm not aware that that is the case. There are a number of contact pieces of information within the user guide itself, and on the website there are specific email addresses to get information about the Census Bureau planning database, and there's also a geography email address, and so we can make sure that that's also sent out.
And you said that this oh, sorry, I can't ask a second question.
You're allowed to follow up.
Oh, okay. Then you will, in 1 week, send us the information that we reviewed today?
Yes, so we are recording the webinar today, and the recorded webinar with the PowerPoint slides will all be available in the recorded webinars portion of the Census Academy website.
Okay, great. Thank you. It was very well done.
Oh, thank you very much.
Our next question is from Lorraine Alda. Your line is open.
Yes. I presented Rome to discuss the data, the quality of the data. I had several questions about how did you get data when people were moving in and out of census tracts? How do you track their movement? So it's all.
Yeah, so I can speak very generally to that, but my expertise is definitely not in the American Community Survey. So perhaps when we are able to post these resources to the Census Academy site, we could also follow up and send you to a more specific answer. I'm sorry, that falls really outside of my expertise.
Well, I won't feel so bad about not knowing the answer myself.
Well, thank you. For the pass, I appreciate that.
Our next question is from Raquel. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you so much. And this is a very well done webinar. Thank you. My question is, what is the release date for the new results? You mentioned 2013 to 2017, and you also say next month. Do you have a specific date for such?
Yeah, so we are targeting right now to release the new version of Rome and the planning database that will, the 2019 planning database that will have those 2013 to 2017 ACS 5-year estimates in it. Right now we're targeting the week of June 24th. So there are a number of things that have to fall in line for that to be the case, but that's what we're working toward really hard right now.
Thank you so much.
Our next question is from Ed Walker. Go ahead, sir. Your line is open.
Thank you. I love Rome. I'm a partnership specialist, and my biggest issue is being able to customize my presentations with a particular tract for the area that I am presenting to. And to do that, I must be able to take the particular map I'm looking for and easily take it over somehow and put it in my PowerPoint. How can I do that easily? Is there a print feature or something like that that I can do that with?
Yeah, really good question. So right now, there is no particular print option, and that's, again, an IT limitation on our side of things. What I have been doing and what I do when I have to do static PowerPoint presentations is taking a screenshot or a print screen. And so we have information, again, in the our guide, hold on, I think I got off of that really quickly, but in our user guide for how to go ahead and do that. Let me see if I can find that quickly. So I think we have, I think that the simple guidance is just to use some sort of print screen functionality. We don't get into necessarily like an actual application to use. But if you have something like that available to you, which normally comes on any type of Windows operating system or Mac, you should be able to do that type of thing. So basically saving an image or saving a screenshot and attaching that.
And our next question comes from Dennis Siglinger. Your line is open.
Hi, my name is Dennis Siglinger. I think this is great that this is finally implemented. I was the ITAP coordinator for the Denver Regional Census Center in 2010, and I sure wish that we had had this facility at that time. My question to you is, in the I call them local census offices, the ones that are going to open later on, who is expected to kind of coordinate the use of Rome? Is it primarily recruiting or partnership or both? Is it IT or field ops, or is there going to be like a designated ITAP person on the staff to kind of coordinate the use of it?
A good question, and I'm glad, congratulations for going through your second decennial census too. There is a Rome working group that's made up of one regional geographer from each one of the regions and a number of partnership specialists. And so we can make sure internally that the partnership group is sharing that information with all of the internal staff. Just because this is one of the public webinars, we don't want to necessarily share that information across right here, but internally we'll make sure that you get that information for sure. And I'm glad that this is helpful to you.
That's great. I'm glad that you guys did this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Anne Marie Diaz. Your line is open.
Hi, I too am thrilled that you guys opened up Census Academy. I'm like Ed, a partnership specialist out in Broward County, Florida. And I have struggled to use this. And I did find out, like Ed, that you can't really go live in the middle of your presentation. But I do keep a tab open and try to teach them the things that I do know. And I usually try to have a city planner to help out because they're more familiar with it. My question was going to be that if we could incorporate it into the presentation. And the other thing I'd like to know is you showed the table at the bottom. Where is the option to print that table? I didn't see that, so I'd like to know where that is.
Yeah, no problem at all. So if your data table down here below has 5,000 or less features in it, you're able to go to the Options tab here and export that as a CSV file. So I can go ahead and I'll open that up and show you what that looks like. So the 64 census tracts that I had in my data table right now are now accessible either through Excel or SAS or whatever type of third-party application you'd like to open a comma delimited file in. And we also have information on that user guide for how to do that and keep all of the leading zeros. So if you are going to be saving a comma delimited file and opening it in Microsoft Excel, for instance, go ahead and definitely check out that part of the user guide.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And our next question is from Jane Madden. Your line is open.
This looks like a fantastic application, and you're doing a wonderful job of explaining things. When you were whipping around here at one point, I thought I saw the school district option, and my question is for research for some of our faculty. If I understand it correctly, let's say for the state of South Carolina, if I wanted to find all of the school districts and the associated census tracts, and then the information for those census tracts, is that too much detail at one time? Does it have to be broken down more? And then the notion, then I see how it would be exported. I get that part. But is that possible to drill down to the districts, like to get all the schools? Let's say secondary schools.
Okay, that's a really great question. That's one that we get oftentimes. So unfortunately, the data table, you're only able to query what's in the data table. Because census tracts aren't nested within a lot of other higher level geographies, we're not able to put a school district code on this data table for you to actually physically query out census tracts within a particular school district. However, if you turn on the school district layer, you can get a better sense for what those So right now we're looking at Richland County, and it looks like there are 1, 2, 3 census tracts in here. So it's not a direct data analysis, but it's a visualization tool that can help you still make smart decisions about areas within particular other levels of geography, like school districts or like congressional districts.
So we could, if not, okay, I see what you mean now, because but for the high schools, is it possible to get a list, let's say, of all the schools who they would be in a single census tract?
I see what you're saying there, and also that's not something that this tool is able to do. I'm just kind of running off the cuff here, and maybe we can just sort of see if there is a data layer available within that catalog that has the location of schools, but the Census Bureau does not keep locations of actual schools within it. So that might be another example of something that you could use that add data tool to try to do, again, not necessarily a data analysis, but an exploratory visual search of an area.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So one of the other questions that we got on our end was, we said application, does it mean that you have to download something? And I just wanted to reiterate again that this is just a web-based mapping application. So you simply need a web browser and internet connection. This isn't something that you're able to download to a particular device and carry on a device. You are able to access this on a smartphone, on a tablet, on a laptop, on a PC.
And our next question comes from Andrew Sutta. Your line is open.
Hi there. Just more of an answer. I'm a partnership specialist over here in LA. I've been using just using the snipping tool to just, when I've been using this in a Road to 2020 presentation, going back to the gentleman who asked how to kind of visualize this or download the data.
That's awesome. Thank you for pointing that out.
And our next question is from Julie Frieder. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm a partnership specialist in Colorado, and I'm wondering, in our outreach and education work right now, is there anything we should know about working with Rome after the census is live? So in March of 2020, how the application and platform will change in its utility for census folks and also others who will be using it?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So the answer to that is that Rome will not be changing. There will be a separate web mapping application that will be stood up from a different area of the agency that will have the daily response rates associated with it. From what I know at this point in time, that's going to go down to the census tract level, and it will report self-response rates for other levels of geography as well, but census tract is the lowest level. So at that point in time, it sounds like you may be using two different types of things in tandem.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
Awesome, you're welcome.
If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly when prompted so I may introduce you. Our next question comes from Janine Day. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm interested in finding out, how did you word the variable when you were doing, I suppose it was a filter for the low response rate? You said Spanish-speaking variable is greater than 25%. Where did you find that? Is there a category for those filters?
So there is actually, there's not necessarily a category for those types of filters, but there's essentially, you can get as creative as you'd like with filters. One of the things that I wanted to point out, because I obviously know where that variable is just because this is something that I work with day in and day out, so I'm sorry if I didn't make it super clear. But basically the planning database has certain headings for all of the data variables that are available in it. And in that data dictionary that is available right from census.gov/Rome, we've basically
we're using all of the same data variable names from the planning database, so that if you're already a familiar user of the planning database, this will easily carry over. We didn't want to change that. Additionally, if you download 64 census tracts because they meet some particular type of criteria of a population that you're interested in and want to go back to the planning database and join it back to the full full swath of American Community Survey data that's available over there, you can do that. So what I would recommend, if you're interested in sort of seeing if variables that you're interested in are within this application, if you go to that data dictionary and just type the word Spanish, for instance. And so here you can see that we actually have a Hispanic origin variable right here. Then we have the different measures of speaking Spanish, and there are several other languages included as well. So I hope that helps better.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And our next question comes from Ed Walker. Your line is open.
Thank you. Thank you to my partnership specialist friend in LA for the information on a snipping tool. Unfortunately, I'm going to reveal my ignorance, and I don't know what that is. Is there any way that you could tell me, please?
So I think that your person from LA can probably send you an email specifically about that. But I'd also be happy to show you really quickly if this is something that I actually have on my laptop. And here it is. So it comes with Windows. I'm working on a Windows operating tool. It's called the snipping tool. And if you play around with this, you'll be able to do, like take a screenshot, basically just clip out a picture or a window. So there are several other applications that can do this as well. But I hope that the LA compadre out there can help you, or you can reach out to Deb directly, who sent out the WebEx information, and we'll make sure that you get that.
And our next question is from Lee Wen. Your line is open.
Hi, just have a question. So I see that you can filter all the features on the map. For example, when you select, say, for example, the Washington State and Hispanic speakers about 10%, then there are, say, for example, there are 35 features. Can we highlight all the features on the map at once? Because I see that you are clicking onto one and then we'll go to that one particular census tract. But can we select all of them?
Yeah, so if, depending on the number of features that exist in the data table, if you click the left bar on any of these census tracts so that it highlights that particular census tract, and then I'm just using my mouse wheel right now to scroll down, and I'm clicking shift clicking that, you can see that on the map more than one census tract is highlighted. So it's a shift mouse wheel, shift click, and that'll get you a number, like multiple census tracts on that map.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The next operator, this is Deb. I would just like to ask you, how many questions do we have on the queue right now?
There are 2.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take these last 2 questions, but after that we're going to probably wrap up the session for today.
The question comes from Evelyn Ramirez. Your line is open.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for a really great training. I'm Evelyn Ramirez, and this is my second decennial census. I'm in the North Florida area. I think this is a really remarkable tool. And my question is the following. I can see that people are, particularly partners and complete count committee CCCs, are going to be very excited to use this tool. And so in an effort to streamline the process of helping them ascertain all the information that they can, I'm going to assume that there's going to be a lot of in-depth queries. How do I do this? How do I find this tract? Will you provide us with a Rome Department human person, a number that we can refer, kind of like a concierge service for Rome, if people want to do additional in-depth study and review and process this, only because I want to streamline that information when partners are asking things of us after that initial presentation, visit, and exposing them to this tool?
Yeah, sure. So that wouldn't necessarily come from me, but I'm familiar with the area that's standing up that Rome working group and who would be able to get through all of those tools. So we'll make sure that I follow up with that group of folks to make sure that something like that can happen for you all.
That's exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know there were a couple of other, well, I'm sorry, operator, let's go ahead and take the last question.
All right, the last question comes from Monica Otel. Your line is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, Monica Otel from Minnesota. I have this question, a little bit different than the rest. I'm from the community-based organization, and we are working hard here with the co-creators table to reach out to historically undercounted communities. My question is about the, I'm curious about, besides the use of this ROM database or application for the census that is quite clear now, and for partners specialists, typically what will be another use of this data and other users?
So if I'm understanding, what would other uses aside from partnership specialists be for something like this? And you're working with a community group. And so I think that a community group can actually gain a lot out of this tool. The same principles that the Census Bureau is using to help target these, identify these hard to count areas, and then sending resources and using resources in those areas. I think that something like that could actually help you if your community group does have a strong following, or you do have a number of people that could get onto the ground and go to different establishments within the areas that look hard to count in the area that you serve. I think that this tool could actually, provide the same exact planning of outreach, planning where to send people to educate folks, go to a local library maybe and tell them about Census Academy. Maybe get the librarians there on board with, information on Census Academy and how to register for free webinars like this, because this is just the beginning of this session of training. So I think that would be just my advice off the cuff.
Thank you.
I did really quickly want to make sure that everybody knew, because I jumped out of the PowerPoint and never came back, but the PowerPoint that you're also going to be receiving does have information directly for how to find those Tiger Web REST services. And it also, for anybody else out there that's a GIS developer or more familiar with GIS, the data that lies within this application is also available for other GIS users to build their own local applications around. So that's something that's exciting because the Census Bureau authoritative data for Rome is free and open for other people to use. And then I did just want to point out that we have a link directly to the application and all of those resources that I covered in Open today, as well as some planning database resource information.
Great. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you for a wonderful presentation and for agreeing to be a part of the Census Academy. We really appreciate it. Very informative presentation today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And once again, we'd like to thank everybody who joined us on the line and on WebEx as well. Thank you for your interest in Census Academy. Don't forget to visit us. We still have webinars that are part of the Census Academy webinar series that go through June 28th. But after that, we will continue to have our regularly scheduled webinars throughout the year. Today's recorded session will be posted, I would want to say probably by the end of this week, and it will be available on the Census Academy website listed under recorded webinars. And I'll make sure to send out that link through the chat so you can go ahead and bookmark it. And also stick around and check out all of the additional learning resources we have available there. So thank you once again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, and that does conclude today's conference call. We appreciate your participation, and you may disconnect at this time.